Good evening, everybody, and how are we all doing today? It is Sunday, the 4th of August, 2024. It's Sunday night, which means it's time for our Sunday night talk, Sunday night gathering, whatever you might like to call it. Basically, we're going to talk about gardening. And tonight, the subject up for discussion is, what do you grow in your winter? No. What do you grow in your greenhouse over winter? So, first of all, let's see if anybody is actually out there. Right, we've got Adrian saying hello to Richard and all. Good evening to you. Scott is there saying good evening all. Looking forward to this one. Not really grown in a greenhouse over winter before, so hoping for lots of tips. Good evening to you. And Right is there. Good evening, veg growers. Good evening to you. Turbo Stream. Good evening, veg podcasters. Good evening to you. Kate says, good evening, Veg Army. Good evening to you. Allotted Chef Nathan says, evening all. Good evening to you. Idaho Garden Girl is there. Good evening to you. Hope you are well. Anna Jones is there saying, good evening, gardeners. Good evening to you. What else have we got? Anybody else? And we've got Nigel there saying, hello all. Good evening to you, Nigel, aka Muddy Boots. That's it for now. I'm sure there will be more coming along in a moment. Let's have a quick check on our Instagram. The Kentish Gardener has joined and saying evening. Good evening to you. Unfortunately, I can't bring up the comments on Instagram like I can on all the other channels. So anyway, how are we all doing? Are we all having a good week? It's been a warm one, hasn't it? From what I remember, it's been a bit of a blur this week, to say the least. But we'll make the most of it nonetheless. As I said, tonight, the topic up for discussion is, what do you grow in your greenhouse over winter? So I think the first thing I need to know, how many of us actually have a greenhouse? If you have a greenhouse, say I. If you don't have a greenhouse, say nay. I'm in one of those weird moods. I had a friend round today, and it brings me out sometimes. Chili Kate is there saying, hi, everyone. Good evening to you. Idaho Garngale says, I've not grown in a greenhouse over winter. I would have to add supplemental heat. Good. This is something we want to discuss a bit. So good thinking there. Good subject. Ian, my dad has joined, says, evening all. Good evening to you. Turbo Stream says, nay. Oh, God, I warn you. Chili Kate says nay or nay. Nigel says aye. So does that mean he's got two greenhouses? Kate says nay. I started something there, didn't I? But hey, I love it. Anna Jones says nay. So this is interesting. Over on Instagram says, Kentish Gardener, I tried to grow a few bits in the greenhouse in early spring, but not the best of luck. Yeah, it can be a problem if you get it too early. Allotted Chef Nathan says I as well. So that's interesting. That's interesting because the majority of people don't have a greenhouse so far. I mean, I do think a greenhouse is a fantastic tool if you can afford one, but they are a luxury, I think I would put it in. But Kate does come back, so I'm a bit thirsty today. Kate says, but I'm planning on growing in my shed, which has good light. A good shed with good light can make the difference as well, so it can help. And then Scott also says I. So the majority of people don't have a greenhouse. Digwell has joined. Digwell, do you have a greenhouse? I for yes or nay for no? Turbo Stream says, nay, Mr. Wilkes. Emmerdale Farm reference for us other folk. I have not watched Emmerdale Farm for, goodness knows how long. Aaron Wright says, I share a greenhouse and we mostly use for overwintering tender plants. Yeah, I mean, this is what we're going to get into in just a moment. Nicola says, evening, Richard and all. I don't. That's a nay from Nicola. And Digwell says, he does have a greenhouse as well. So I thought there would be more people with a greenhouse than that, I'll be honest. Okay, so let's flip the question. What about polytunnel? Do you have a polytunnel? A or nay? Upon myself, I should say. I've got a greenhouse here at home. Uh, technically two greenhouses down on the allotment, but one isn't glazed. So I do have those. I don't have a polytunnel. In the past, I've used sheds to grow food in and porches and things like that. So, as TurboStream says, does my south-facing porch count? It doesn't, but for the purposes of the question tonight, I'm going to say it might help with what you might want to grow in there as well. Chili Cake says nay to the polytunnel. Digwell says I stopped watching Emmerdale after they dropped the word farm from the title. Not real any longer. I don't know. I cannot remember when I watched it. But no polytunnel at present. So Nicola does have a polytunnel, but not at present. Nigel says 2 greenhouses. Allotment greenhouse is unheated, so just grow a few overwintered spring onions and lettuce, used mainly for protecting stored crops, potato tubs. Let's have a quick check on Instagram. Roots Up has joined. So next question then is how many of us have a heated greenhouse? This is something that does pop up every winter, and I've always avoided the need for adding heat into my greenhouse. But I have to admit, I'm starting to think about getting a heater in my greenhouse. I've got a lot of concerns about having the correct heater in certain greenhouses, but my plan is over the next couple of months, I'm planning on actually getting a shed greenhouse combination, and I'm planning on heating that to start my seeds off. But that'll be something we'll discuss in a bit. Digger says nay to the tunnel. Nicholas says got the frame, needs recovering after increasing height. They're not easy to cover, are they? I don't think. Virgil says garden greenhouse has diesel heater used to start early seedlings to keep above 10 degrees C. Scott says I did have a polytunnel, but it blew away. It's believed to be somewhere in Scotland now. It happens with those polytunnels. That's why I'm not a fan of them. Rob's Allotment Garden, good evening. I hope you've had a great weekend. Rob, do you have a greenhouse? Yay, aye or nay? Is the question at the moment. Turbo Stream says I grew Swiss chard and attempted to grow lettuce. All I got was a lot of green fly infestation. Probably won't bother again. So this is one of the problems with a greenhouse, is that you can get obviously infestations from things like green fly, white fly, especially at the spring times of year. But there's ways around that, which we will hopefully get into in a little bit later, or ideas from you guys. Digwell says I to the greenhouse heater, an electric fan heater on 12 degrees C thermostat, pennies to run with polycarb glazing. My camera's gone again. I don't know why this keeps doing this. I've got to fix that one day. One day I will. So the majority of people don't have a greenhouse, but even few people have a heated greenhouse. So that's interesting. How many people would like a greenhouse? That is always the big question. For me, a greenhouse is a tool. I got mine when I first moved into this house about 10 years ago, although we did have a semi sort of greenhouse shed in our garden when we moved in here as well, which was used, and it was lovely until it basically was falling to pieces and I took it down. But since getting a greenhouse, it's been one of the best things I've ever done for growing my own food. The reason being is, of course, a greenhouse is there to extend the seasons. It keeps anything in there a little bit warmer than it would be outside, which means we can grow a little bit more earlier on, grow a bit more food in the greenhouse over winter, and so on. So there's a lot of advantages to having a greenhouse. It is an investment, but I think they are worthwhile investment. Not heated anything, says Nicola. Rob says I got 2 greenhouses on the allotment, but don't use them in the winter. And says polytunnel on the allotment, but door no longer shut, so no good for the winter. Yeah, I would love a greenhouse at home, says Rob. And Kate says I do use heated propagators and hydroponics over winter in the house. So those that do have a greenhouse, what do you grow in your greenhouse over winter and why? Now, my greenhouse is on the allotment. I don't really use over winter. I plan to, but because the winds and everything can cause a lot of damage to the greenhouses and a lot of glass can get broken, I tend not to worry too much about it. The greenhouse is quite a delicate place after all. My greenhouse at home, I tend to store a lot of my per tender plants over winter. My potted plants, my peach trees, and things like that. This is why one of the reasons I'm looking at getting this greenhouse shed combination. But I also try and grow some food in the greenhouse over winter at the same time. Winter lettuce is absolutely one of my favorite things to grow over winter. Many people don't really think of growing lettuce over winter. They think salads, you think summer, cool crop. But actually, I think you can grow some of the best lettuces by growing them over winter. Certainly the tastiest because they're not stressed from getting too hot. So for me, one of the things that I have to grow in my greenhouse over winter is lettuce. Nicholas says, I've been looking at getting a second-hand conservatory to put on the end of a house south side to use as a 5-meter greenhouse. It's a good idea. Good idea. A lot of people do use a conservatory as a greenhouse, and why not? Double the function. Loved your last video, Digwell. Need to leave you a comment. Idaho says it sounds very interesting. Nicholas says, looking to spend £500 to get a conservatory. That sounds about right for a second-hand one. And if you can fit it yourself, even better, because they're fairly easy to fit, actually. I'm surprised how easy they are. Jenny says, hello, sorry I'm late. I got caught by my neighbour. I hope you're all well and have had a great week. Indeed. We're talking about greenhouses over winter. What do you grow in them? Over on Instagram, the Kentish Gardener says, I would always say yes to a second greenhouse if I had the space. I've never heard of anybody wish they had a smaller greenhouse. They would always say they want a bigger greenhouse. So, yeah, second greenhouse, a bigger greenhouse, it's all what is wanted. Kentish Garner also says, I grew cauliflowers and pak choi, both bolted as soon as we got any sun. That is a problem with a greenhouse. A greenhouse is great over winter for protecting the plants, but as soon as that sun comes out, it can get quite hot inside a greenhouse quite rapidly, and it can lead to some very sort of temperatures that are all over the place, highs and during the day, lows at night, and that can cause stress to a lot of our tender plants. So sometimes it is a case of keeping an eye on the temperature. Sometimes when it comes to winter lettuces, you can actually get away with growing them in cloches or something a bit where the temperature is a bit more consistent. But what do you grow? Let's throw this open to you guys now. What do you grow in your greenhouse over winter, those that do have a greenhouse, particularly for crops that you can harvest over winter? That I think is what this conversation really wants to get going. Scott says having fresh lettuce over winter would be amazing. That's what I'm definitely trying. Yep, you won't regret it. You won't regret it. You do have to keep an eye on the temperature, as I said, but that's something to monitor as well. Jenny says, I have 2 little zippy greenhouses at the moment, but looking for a wooden one to replace them in the front garden. Not allowed one you can walk in, so just a cupboard style one, if that makes sense. I know what you mean. Yeah, the sort of 6 foot high but 2 foot wide type thing I think you're talking about. Yeah, makes a lot of sense there. Nigel says, fit auto vents to roof opening and louvers. Now, this is actually saying I haven't fitted to mine, but I've been thinking about actually fitting some of these auto vents. So they're fairly cheap, I think. They're basically wax inside a piston. When it gets too hot, the wax pushes the piston and it opens your roof openers or your louvers. And it helps, if it gets too hot, it helps keeps your greenhouse cool. Now, I've not fitted one in the past. I've been thinking about doing them lately. The thing that worried me about them, and perhaps if you've got them, you can answer this question, is that I always wondered what would happen if they were fitted and the wind picked up when the window was open, because it can be warm but windy. So, and would that rip off the roof openers? Has anybody had any experience with that? If you have it, that's the question I want to throw out there. Would shading help with the bolting? So I wouldn't shade a greenhouse during the winter. The reason being is that you want to try and maximize the amount of light that you have in a greenhouse. In the winter, the light can be pretty poor, and shading is just going to reduce that down by quite considerably. You want it as bright as you can get it. So it would help with the bolting. Don't get me wrong, it would help with the bolting. It would just counteract the point of a greenhouse. What is the best way, in my opinion, of preventing bolting is to water regularly and keep the soil moist. It's probably far more important. It just and keeping an eye on the temperature and making sure that you open the roof vents if it does get too warm. Nigel says spring onions and winter density lettuce grow well in his greenhouse over winter. Absolutely. Some of the things I would definitely grow: spring onions, winter density lettuce, lamb's lettuce is quite a good one. Microgreens, of course, herbs. Don't forget the herbs, basils and things like that. They might need a bit of heat, but they would do well in a good greenhouse over winter. Sorry, I'm very thirsty. It's quite warm today, so I'm drinking plenty of juice to keep me going. Jenny says the allotment will have a zipping polytunnel, but the cover won't be on over winter. Does happen, doesn't it? Jenny says I do have plastic large cloches, which are great for growing under in winter. Vents at both ends. I got them off free cycle a few years ago. I always say cloches are the next best thing to a greenhouse. If you can't have a greenhouse, then the cloche is just as good in many ways. Openers are quite sturdy. The piston will extend fully if window is forced open. That's what worries me, is that if the wind, if like let's say this is a window and it opens when for warmth of the day, and then the wind gets in, it ranks it like, yeah, that's the thing that's always worried me about the openers. But you know, you see them in professional kitchens or professional gardens, sorry, so there's probably something going on there. Over on Instagram, I Want a Peach Tree has joined and Bearded Growers have joined. Welcome along, guys. Hope you are well. Turbo Stream says, I built a small cold frame, so we'll try a few winter lettuce and spring onions this year. Do it. Do it. I always think it's good to have as many winter crops as possible growing in our greenhouses, our polytunnels, as we can throughout the winter. We need to eat all year round. We need to eat healthy. The only thing I probably wouldn't grow inside a greenhouse over winter would be the brassicas, because I think the brassicas, they're fine outside, most of them. They grow outside absolutely fine. I wouldn't grow sweet corn in a polytunnel over winter. I don't necessarily see the point, but a polytunnel probably has more space. But things like peas, grow those over winter and get an early crop of peas. Pea shoots, of course. A few other ideas I'm going to throw out there. Richard Golden has joined. Hello all. Good evening to you. Idaho says, when I lived in the city, I had an inexpensive 6x8 zippy greenhouse. It relocated itself to the neighbour's yard during a storm. Not having that kind again. Funny enough, I went through two of those zippy greenhouses. They both got blown over. I've given up with them. That's why I've always said the polytunnel type. If I'm going to have a polytunnel, it's got to be one that I spend quite a bit of money on, a sturdy, solid one that is secured to the ground and doesn't get blown away. I know they exist. Just the ones that we have on the cheap ones, I don't think, in my opinion, in my experience, I wouldn't waste my money on the cheap ones anymore. Bayliss XL vents are very popular and have double braces each side of the piston. There we go. That's something to look at. Bayliss XL vents. Turbo Stream says, I always sowed some Japanese winter onions for overwintering. Yep, that's another thing well worth sowing, Japanese winter onions. But they generally, overwintered onions will grow outside. So I don't really see the point of bringing them into a greenhouse. You could grow them in trays in a greenhouse, but they're going to need to go outside at some point. And if it gets too hot, if they're permanently inside a greenhouse, they're going to bolt. So, and they don't, once they're planted, they don't really like being moved around. But under a cloche, and then you can lift the cloche, that can work. I ventured into the world of citrus and unusual fruit trees. A strawberry tree and a lemon tree brought today, so I need to keep them in over winter. So, citrus, yes, you need to keep it somewhere frost-free, but they also need a period of cold at the same time. We're going to have the citrus nursery on the podcast at some point in the future, so keep listening for that. I know where Kate's been today, so I know a little bit what's going on there. Turbo Stream says that I meant for outside with the Japanese winter onions. Yeah, agreed. Kate says, I had one of the plastic type zip grow houses. Never again. One small gust of wind and it went all Mary Poppins across my garden. That's so often the case. And so many people report that with those plastic cheap greenhouses. They get blown all over the place. And it doesn't take much for them to get blown all over the place. That's the 4-tier ones that Wilco's used to sell quite regularly. I've got some of those thinking, great, going to get everything growing, and then they get blown over, and they're not as good as I thought they were going to be. But hey, it's all good fun, isn't it? It's all part of growing our own, and this is why we do it. It's all what we're here to learn. And this is again why when I moved to this house, I wanted a proper greenhouse, and I'm glad I did that. So, anybody else? What else does anybody grow in their greenhouse over winter? And I'm going to open this up, as Turbo Stream has already mentioned his front porch, conservatory, and things like that. Now, I'll bring it back to what I have in my greenhouse over winter. My peach tree goes in my greenhouse over winter. My lemon tree grows in my greenhouse over winter. Trying to think what else. My Szechuan pepper tree stays outside now, but when it was younger, they used to go into the greenhouse over winter as well. But they were mainly for protecting, not so much for growing actual food. And this is the thing that I think many people who have greenhouses don't think about, is that a greenhouse is often overwintered, or a place for overwintering plants, and not really used for actually growing food. So to add to that, Scott has asked, what about things like radish and carrots? Would they work in the greenhouse over winter? So the trouble, if it's unheated, and this is the key thing, the overnight temperature might drop a little bit too cold for them. But if it's heated, then yes. Now the carrots, I'm gonna say, there's a variety called Amsterdam Forcing 2 that I sowed them in my veggie pod in December. They actually grew quite well and gave us some early carrots. So yeah, that could work with the right variety. Radish, I've not tried radish so much, but again, I think that would work. I really do think that would work. So yeah, I don't know if anybody's grown radish or carrots in their greenhouse over winter. There's going to be a good chance to ask that question. Nigel says, Wilco 4-tier are great to use over winter inside another greenhouse. Acts like double glazing. Yes, that is a good point. Some people would do that. Having a greenhouse inside a greenhouse to get twice as much growing, or twice as much warmth. Jenny says, I did manage to keep a zippy polytunnel for 3 years and only took it down when moving house. Marquee pegs all around the base, haulage straps to ground anchor pegs, cover under soil, or sandbags for wind. Yeah, you do really, those zippy polytunnels, you do really have to lock them down into the ground to really make them hold on. Digwell says, I do not grow anything over winter in mine. Why not? Why don't you grow anything in over winter in yours? Most of my veg is outside, eating seasonally, of course. I'm sure, eating seasonally, of course. Anything going on over on? Nothing going on over on Instagram. Now, I'm just thinking something else that I haven't really mentioned. It's not technically a greenhouse, but my veggie pod. I grow a lot of stuff in my veggie pod over winter quite successfully as well. Carrots, lettuce, spring onions, daikon radish can be a good one to grow over winter. Excuse me. If my voice sounds a little bit weird, I actually had well, we think I had COVID this week. I'm over it now, but my throat has been a little sore this week. So if it does sound a little bit off, that is why. Nigel says, I use a small candle on a base of Wilco greenhouse on a cold night. It heats up quickly as only a small volume. But yeah, I mean, when it comes, greenhouse heating is something I do want to discuss because it's something I'm looking at when I get my greenhouse combination. One of the reasons I want a combi greenhouse polytunnel is so that it got two different sections. I can close off one area to heat that to save costs and only heat up one area as opposed to it all. But I think that'd be something we need to get discussing, isn't it? Jenny says, I haven't grown much over winter under cover as I need to space early in the spring for seedlings, divisions, and cuttings. So this is where organisation comes into play. And this is, again, something that I have found. So I grew a lot of my seedlings in the kitchen over winter. The idea being they would go into the greenhouse once the weather was warm enough, or I felt the greenhouse was warm enough to go there. Peppers, chilies, those sort of things. Unfortunately, green fly came along, white fly came along and destroyed them all. So it didn't quite work to plan in the same way. But what I was quickly becoming aware is that my greenhouse, when I fill it up with all my tender plants, my peach tree, my lemon tree, and things like that, I rapidly ran out of room for anything else. And this, again, one of the things I'm thinking of trying to correct so that we can hopefully get a bit more, bit more successful with what we actually use our greenhouse for. I want to use it for growing more food. And I think ideally, I don't want to be doing seedlings or microgreens on the kitchen windowsill or herbs over winter. I want those to be in the greenhouse. But we're really seeing if anybody has had much success with it. Over on Facebook, Amy B Photos has joined. Welcome along. But yeah, when it comes to things like seedlings and cuttings and divisions, this is the trouble with a greenhouse, is that they rapidly do get very, very full, very, very full. And this is a question that, this again, why I'm adding this extra egg greenhouse to my garden so that I can try and make a bit more room. Now, saying that, my greenhouse down on the allotment doesn't get used over winter at all. So probably should try and use that to grow a bit more food. But it's not easy on an allotment, is it? There we go. There we go. Jenny says, the only heating that I've used was a bag in a box of fresh cow manure with urine-soaked straw. Added some leaves and it soon got warm, just enough to keep the frost, etc. out. So a hot bed without the bed. And Rob says, I use an attic for my seedlings. But the heating is something that I think we should discuss. But first, before we get on to that discussion, you set me a challenge last week for finding some plants that or companion plants for going to a ward off slugs and snails. I did a bit of research and I have brought some plants that might fit the bill. Lavender, first one. This is meant to be quite a pungent lavender, and that is meant to ward off some slugs and snails. I've not made a video for this, by the way, same as a sew along. I've not made a video. Thyme is another one. Again, quite a pungent smell, and that's meant to ward off any slugs and snails as well. And then the final plant that I brought, rosemary. Rosemary is meant to ward off slugs and snails as well. I don't know if it's true. It's what I've read, and if anybody has had any experience, then let us know. The other thing that we could use, of course, is marigolds, but I'm not sure on that because I planted loads of marigolds and they still seem to have been eaten. Nigel says, my garden greenhouse is 8x6. I have to use that to also store all of my tools, etc., as I have no other secure storage area. Yeah. This is this is one of the things that I find with greenhouses. They do become a bit of a somewhere to store our tools over winter because it's such a good space, a good dry space inside. But I'm trying to get mine to be purely for plants. And says, I used to have a paraffin heater propagator for early sowings of onions in the allotment greenhouse. Wish I had it now. Paraffin heater is always a good old way of heating a greenhouse, wasn't it? The lovely smell that comes off them as well. Idaho says, I start my seeds on the table in my garage with grow lights and heat mats. Yep. Yeah, I think that's what a lot of us do. My wife just isn't happy with our kitchen worktops always being full of seedlings anymore. So I've got to try and keep her a little happier. The Kentish Gardener has joined us on YouTube. I have a plug-in heater for the greenhouse, but no electricity. Yeah, that can be a bit of a problem. Jenny says they do work. Curry Hub is also a good one, and anything furry such as lamb's ears. There we go. Didn't know that. Nigel says, have a look at diesel heater. Initial cost, but runs cheaply on red diesel, kerosene, and other fuels. So I want to come. Let's come on over to. Actually, no. I'm just going to answer this point here. Jenny says to Kentish Gardener, you need one of those solar charging batteries with a plug socket. Solar charging and heaters, unfortunately, the amount of energy a heater would need to heat up. This is what's the word? Rules or thermodynamic rules. The amount of energy that heaters need to heat up a space is quite drawing on batteries and solar heaters. So you've got to have some big panels and big batteries to heat up anything. I've done the sums before. It doesn't really work out very well doing solar heating like that, unless you can come up with some other way of heating a system using solar. But electric heaters on solar powers doesn't work very well. I've been looking at them recently, but not sure how. I'll be honest, rule of thermodynamics, you've got to put a heater, you've got to put heat in. Heat is an energy. The battery stores energy. It's going to deplete it in seconds. It's simple like that. Just going to have a swig of this. So coming back to heating up our greenhouse. Now, as I said, I'm looking at getting, and it's on my list of getting this greenhouse shed combi. And what I want to do is, once I've taken down my shed, built this new shed, built foundations, built this new shed, the shed is going to be where I start my seeds off. So we're going to insulate the inside to hold on to a lot of heat. We're going to add some heated propagators as well to start the seeds off. There's going to be grow lights, all of which are throwing out heat all the time. But overnight, once it gets cold, especially once we get into those colder temperatures, what I'm then going to be doing is adding a little electric fan heater set on I'm looking about 10 degrees C, just to keep that shed warm. My wife doesn't know this yet because she's not going to like paying for the cost of it, but the electricity, she hates the electricity side of things. But that is definitely something I want to do, because I want to have a heated system. That being said, the heater, the diesel heater that Nigel's been talking about, I've been thinking about might actually be better. If I can get an exhaust to outside, of course, it's very important to exhaust those things because it's basically a diesel engine running inside, and they can produce quite a good amount of heat. So that might be another option that we have. Might be a better option as well because then my wife won't see the costs of it. But the heaters can be expensive. If you're going to buy a heater, it's probably the best time at this time of year to buy a new heater because, in theory, that should be cheap. That should be cheaper. Nigel says, talking about the red diesel, local garage sells it from a pump. I know a few garages around here that sell red diesel as well. If you can get it. Not everywhere sells it, and of course, it's very strict with what you do with it. Jenny says, "I've no experience, just from watching other YouTube account. Maybe get an electrician at Kentish Garden. Get an electrician. Trust me, the solar powered batteries. I'll put it like this: a little heater to warm up a room this size." 500-watt heater isn't. You're going to be looking at a kilowatt heater. That's drawing a kilowatt of electricity every hour. That's a lot of electricity, and a battery is not going to be, unless it's a big battery, it's not going to be able to hold on to that much. Rob says, I thought the government had stopped, but farmers just claimed their duty back along with the VAT. I think they still do buy red diesel, but yeah. Nigel says, diesel heater install video 302 on my YouTube channel. Yeah. I've got to admit that a diesel heater is definitely on my list. And Jenny says, we need the old Victorian heated water system. A brick. Yes. Now we are talking. Yeah, the old Victorian. This is what I love about Audley End House. When I didn't see it last time there, but there was an old Victorian heater system in the grounds there. And what they would do is the undergardener had to keep the fire going overnight in like a boiler, and the boiler heated up water that went into the peach houses and the hot houses and kept the plants alive. Now, if the undergardener, the apprentice, didn't keep that fire going all night and it died and a lot of plants were killed, there would have been questions to be asked. They were very strict, but it's a very efficient way. The smoke can be a bit of a problem, and would you really want to leave a fire unattended overnight? That's what my only other thing with it, but I like it. Nigel says, you can siphon diesel out of your works van. I know, I would never do that. Of course not. I cannot do that. My boss's daughter sometimes watches this, so I definitely do not do that. I was told that red diesel is stopping when supplies run out. Users then have to claim the duty paid back from HMRC. No idea on that, but it's possible. Wouldn't surprise me at all. Nothing over on Instagram. Anybody else got anything else that they would grow in their greenhouse over winter to provide food? It's something I really would like to know a bit more of. I've seen people growing indoors in like what do we call them? Those big silver grow tents, and with hydroponics and things like that. Tomatoes that they harvest over winter, chilies that harvest over winter, and things like that. But they're generally indoors. I mean, I don't like them. They're generally related to the drug trade, but I don't like them because we don't really grow much food indoors. I'm just checking because I keep seeing Facebook flash up. Oh yeah, somebody is posted on Facebook. I think somebody's posted on the Facebook group, but I can't see it on the screen here. So apologies to that, but it's just the way Facebook works these days. Yeah. Like grow them over winter, as Turbo Stream says. Cannabis growers for winter growing tips. I mean, a lot were grown in lofts, weren't they? And that could be another option for growing a grow tent and having, say, tomatoes and things like that are going in there. What we are saying? So Digwell says no need to siphon it. Most have electric fuel pumps these days. Wink, wink. Nigel says kerosene is cheaper than red diesel. It burns slightly hotter. There we go. That's good. Good options. Rob's laughing. And Turbostream. Oh yeah, I read that one. I think Monty Don grows a lot of mustards over winter in a greenhouse along with salads. Actually, mustards is a good one. I actually grow mustards outside quite successfully, but we are quite mild here. But yeah, mustards, especially the oriental vegetables. So that could be the oriental mustard, the tatsoi, the mizuna. I can't think of any others, but yeah, they're great ones actually. I find mizuna actually self seeds and then grows all over my garden, comes back year after year. That's a good one, and the birds don't eat it and stuff like that. But mustards, as a very good one. Rocket as well can be pretty hardy inside a greenhouse. Certainly, a lot of the salad greens, I think you're going to get away with growing inside a greenhouse. And again, I come back to microgreens, which again, when I get my shed greenhouse combo, I'm going to be growing. Going to be growing microgreens, but I'm going to be using seed trays from the Autopot range to grow microgreens over winter in a greenhouse, which I think just makes a lot of sense. What have we got? Jenny says, I've seen people grow garlic under cover for an earlier harvest. Also for earlier harvest, broad beans and peas. Broad beans and peas, yes, I definitely agree with that for an earlier harvest. Garlic, you've got to be careful with garlic because garlic does need a period of about a week of being consistently below 10 degrees C. So if you've got a heater in there and it's above 10 degrees C, your garlic is just going to stay as one solid bulb. It's not going to break down into individual cloves. So if it's an unheated greenhouse, you can probably get away. I don't think you're going to get an earlier harvest though, because garlic is generally triggered by light levels, bit like onions. It senses when the days start dropping or getting shorter, and that's when it starts being ready. I could be wrong on that with garlic, thinking about it, but I'm sure somebody would correct me on that. Rob says most vehicles now have anti-siphoning fitted now. That too right as well. Most vehicles you can't really open without a key either. Can't get into the fuel tank so easily now, can you? Charles Dowden grows a few crops in the plastic mushroom trays in his greenhouse. Yeah, on top of his hotbeds as well, where he uses basically composting to generate heat inside his greenhouse, which is a great idea. I tried doing it once in my greenhouse. It didn't work for me. It did not get hot enough inside that to produce any heat inside my greenhouse. But the idea was there. But I think you need quite a big compost bin for it to really work. Nigel says, I used a grow tent with Vitopod and grow lights inside. Small contained area, so heat is almost provided by grow lights. It's going back to what I was saying earlier. You do need a small fan in there to circulate the air. Yeah, you could get a solar-powered fan. That could work as well. Nicola says, I bought some sub-pod covers in their closing down sale. Going to use to cover homemade veg beds built with used decking boards. Just need to make the metal frame to keep the cover up. Do it. I would rocket work over winter. Would rocket work over winter? Yes, it can. It is pretty hardy actually. I often do so rocket over winter in my veg pod, so I think in the greenhouse it would be absolutely fine. Yeah. Nicholas says, saw a YouTube video where they built a compost bay next to a polytunnel and used a fan to bring the heat from the compost heap into a polytunnel to keep frost off. Heap was well covered. Years ago, and I'm talking probably 20 years ago, there was a company that actually made a compost bin that would attach onto a greenhouse. And the heat from the compost bin would, of course, heat your greenhouse. I don't think it exists anymore, but I think it's a great idea. Especially if you're going to be composting anyway. If you want to heat your greenhouse, this is just a much more efficient way of producing both heat and compost at the same time and keeping your greenhouse heat. But I don't think they make them anymore. But there are ways around it. You could almost run like a set of pipes into a greenhouse from a compost bin and use convection to heat the greenhouse. It's gone direction didn't think we were going to take, but yeah, use convection. The air gets heated up in these pipes in your compost bin, goes back into the greenhouse, and cold air comes back in and gets heated up. That's an idea if you're handy at making things. That is. Charles Dowding heaps 1.5 meters by 1 meter. Do a very big heap and heat tops up. Starts in spring though. Yeah, that's it. 1.5 by 1 meter. That's most of my greenhouse taken up. So it's just not feasible in my greenhouse. In a greenhouse with a slab form, my friend uses 2 bricks, a terracotta pot, and a candle to help to keep the temperature just above freezing. I haven't tried it, but it worked for her. Yeah, that's a very popular way of doing it. The people used to fill up a candle in a jam jar and fill it up with like lard and stuff as well, so it would burn 24 hours, as I understand it. Again, just that little flame would just help keep the frost off a greenhouse or out of a greenhouse. But you do have to be very, very, very careful. It's a naked flame at the end of the day. It might get too hot. Right. Anybody else got anything they want to add? I just want to say, anybody watching in the Facebook group, apologies if I can't see your comments. They're not coming up. I think it was Amanda. So I do want to say hello to everybody out there as well. Digwell says, Charles Dowding uses more compost in his hotbed than I make in 2 years. Yeah, I mean, making enough compost is actually, that's a subject we're going to discuss next week. How much compost can you produce and how do you produce more compost? So keep the conversation going. I am going to start sowing this week's sow along. It is these cauliflowers, which I've gone for a variety called All Year Round. Oh, look at that. It focuses in on that. And all of a sudden, the picture looks so much better. Wonder what's going on with that. I did make a video, as I said, I've had COVID this week, so I'm very, very behind, and I had got over it. Of course, I had a friend pop around today, so it's been a little busy. But what I've done is to sow cauliflowers. I have actually got just down here one of my rubber plug plant starters. This is made out of rubber, which makes them reusable, easy to get the seeds in or the compost in and out, and they've lasted quite a long time. I'm quite impressed with these. I filled this up with seed sowing compost, and if I switch over to this camera, as you can see, I couldn't quite get a decent angle on this. So what we're going to do, and please feel free to share your tips on how you grow cauliflower as we do this. So what we're going to do, I'll open this packet up. We'll get a few seeds out. Now, we could broadcast sow them because these are, as you can see, if it focuses, very, very small seeds. We could just sow them in one go, but scatter the seeds and then prick them out later. But I'm trying to reduce the amount of pricking out that I do because it's a job that I absolutely hate. So what I do, I'm going to put a single seed, if I go back to this, into a single plug plant. I've done this a few times. It's fiddly because the seeds are so small, but it makes my life so much easier. As I said, I hate the bricking outside of things because I just get bored of it, and I find it a bit of a waste of compost as well in some cases. So I'm going about half a centimetre deep with these seeds, and then I'm just dropping one per plug plant. We will keep these inside my kitchen until they germinate. Then we will, excuse me, start planting them up and putting them into bigger pots once the roots are evident from the bottom, and they need quite clearly need to go into a bigger pot. And then what we would then do, keep them growing, and then when they're large enough to handle being outside, we will plant them out in a brassica bed. Not forgetting, of course, to add lime to the root ball as we plant them. And then these should grow quite comfortably over, probably producing the winter, I would imagine. So it's definitely all about winter growing. These will be outside. They shouldn't, in theory, need any cover. They should also produce better cauliflowers in theory than summer, because summer cauliflowers I find have a tendency to bolt rather quickly. These give you a little bit more time to do quite well, to get on top of them. Nutrients, I do use a seaweed fertilizer on these, and that's about it. But overall, there's not much to grow in cauliflowers. The difficulty I find with cauliflowers, and I always say cauliflowers are one of the hardest plants to grow, is that the difficulty is the fact that they bolt so easily, because often we try and grow them for summer and they're not really a summer crop. I describe them more as a winter crop. They're a brassica. So anybody got any tips on growing cauliflower, please feel free to share it. What have we got going on? What have we got? What have we got? Canescent fairy lights can also be used in poly low frames to keep the frost off. I've never heard of canescent fairy lights. So, candescent. Oh, candescent. Yes, candescent. Basically, the old style filament lights. They can do quite well or give off quite a bit of heat, can't they? What's going on Instagram? Nothing going on over there. What have we got? What have we got? Turbo Stream says, I stopped watching Charles Dowden. His method works for him, but he doesn't transfer to an allotment 2 miles away. I think this is the thing, that Charles Dowden's method, I think they do work if you follow him to the letter. Everybody gardens differently is what I mean to say. We all have different things that are going on, different soils, different times, and so on. So we all garden differently. It's all about trying to find out a system that works for you, as opposed to trying to copy someone because it works for them. Does that make sense? That's the way I look at it. When would you expect to harvest the cauliflowers sown now? These ones will probably, August, probably ready sort of December, I would reckon. I reckon these would probably be ready sort of December, maybe a bit later than that. And this is a variety called All the Year Round. Let me see, All the Year Round. So they're fairly constant variety, fairly well-known variety. Fairly well-known variety. I grow all year round quite often. They're not the best cauliflower, if I'm honest with you. They're not the biggest, but they're reliable, and you can buy one packet, make a few sowings, and sow them several times a year from one packet. So that makes it worthwhile. Where were we? Did I miss what sort they are? I think I've answered that. Nigel says, with the diesel heater, I've seen extra long exhaust pipes used with just a tip going outside, gives off extra heat. Also seen exhaust run through a central heating radiator, which also heats quickly. Yeah. I mean, when it comes to heating, I've always said you want to heat things to, you want to hold on to the heat, not just heat things. This is my fridge brain going here. So, like in my greenhouse, I actually have a water butt, and that water butt does get warm throughout the day, and that stays at warmer a little bit longer into the night because it comes a battery sink. And it's the same if you've got stones or things like that in your greenhouse, it's going to hold on to the heat for a little bit longer than if it's just plain soil. Little tricks that I find helps hold on to heat. I need to sow some collies and see how it goes. Charles Dowding is a commercial grower. Yeah, I mean, this is a key thing. He grows things as a market gardener. His method is transferable, but a lot of what he talks about is he's growing to sell food. So a lot of the stuff that we might grow for growing ourselves, he may not grow because it doesn't make commercial or financial sense. And that's sometimes what I think people forget is that it's we're growing food at home because we want to grow food at home. We're not growing it to sell. He's a commercial grower. His systems work, but they may not work for everyone. It's all about what works for you. Yes, and how many people? Yes, he is, and how many people work for him? He's got a few people. Got a few people. Same as Monty Don, though, isn't it? Monty Don has a few people working that garden for him, but that gets forgotten about quite often. As I said, it's all about different methods and different ways of doing things. If I can get a cauliflower as big as a tennis ball, I would be chuffed to bits. Yeah, it does get like that. I mean, these all year round. So I get them about the size of a melon, I would say. Not huge, but good enough. Good enough. The flavour's okay on them. I can't really criticise them. I'm not a cauliflower lover, if I'm honest with you. Um, we get cauliflower, we might make a load of cauliflower cheese, and that's about it. I mean, does anybody like cauliflower? It's one of those vegetables that I think people talk a lot of, but nobody really does like it. I might be wrong on that. I might be wrong on that. I'm just going to finish sowing these seeds, like so. One more. There we go. So all those seeds are sown. We're going to keep those indoors so that they are safe and warm, and we'll prick them or pot them up as they grow. Get them outside, I reckon, in a month's time, once they're bedded in and everything. And I reckon December we will be harvesting those. I could be wrong, but we shall see. I haven't got an update for the other seeds that we've sown recently, but I will update you with that. Nicholas says, having ponies fresh supply of horse poo too makes as many heaps, plus chuck duck bedding, wood chips, compost out run the range during days unless extremely wet. They then stay in smaller runs. Yeah, if you've got the materials to make a lot of compost, well, we'll talk about the compost next week. We're going to talk about compost next week. Nigel says, collie sprouts and runner beans, 3 of my favourites. Okay, so interesting. I love cauliflower. One of my favorite things to grow. I will always grow them. It's interesting. A lot of people struggle to grow cauliflowers, I find. I like growing them. They are a challenge. I'm just not a lover of cauliflower, but I got it wrong when I thought, is anybody else really a lover? Most of you are. Love cauliflower, possibly my favorite veg, really. Nicola, I love cauliflower. Turbo Stream. I did well for cauliflower last year. This year, the one solitary one that survived is now in the freezer. Yeah, brassicas have been the heroes this year. What's going on Instagram? Nothing going on over there. Brassicas for me have been the heroes this year. Cauliflowers, cabbages, all have done pretty damn well. And they're going to get better. Scott says, I love cauliflower, but I've never been able to grow it. So my thing is, I think most people struggle with cauliflower because they try and grow it for the summer, because I don't know why, actually. It is a brassica. It's a cool weather crop. There are summer varieties, of course, and you can grow it sort of spring into the summer, but it is more likely to bolt in the summer. And unless you shade it out, some people will actually use the leaves to shade out the curd, or keep the soil moist, mulch the soil as well, helps keep it moist and cool and prevent it from bolting. But itchy nose tonight. But that's again, when it comes to the winter, they're less likely to bolt, from my experience. Try Clapton cauliflower, a good club root resistant variety. Club root, that's probably one of the other problems most people have. I've never had it myself, so it's not been a problem. But doesn't, correct me if I'm wrong, club root stays in the soil for 20 years or so, doesn't it? Toby Stream says, I found the igloo cauliflower grows well too. Only small ones though. Yeah, the igloo, I think I sent that out at the supporters club. That is a small cauliflower. Small cauliflower, but it does grow quite well. I would say for a single person, the size of the igloo cauliflower is probably about right for a single person for 1 meal. One of the other problems you've got to remember that can happen with cauliflowers, particularly the summer ones. So I've just sown a whole tray of these seeds, which if you go here, you know, that's 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. 30 seeds, assuming all 30 cauliflowers come up, technically, because we've sown them all at the same time, 30 cauliflowers would probably be ready about the same time. So who's really going to be ready to eat 30 cauliflowers in one go? Now, I'm not saying all 30 are likely to come up. I would expect half of that, 15 cauliflowers, probably likely to germinate. But even so, 15 cauliflowers already in one go is a lot of cauliflowers. So what I do recommend is you try and sow a few every few weeks to try and, if you do eat cauliflowers, try and eke out how often you need to harvest the cauliflowers. Unless, of course, you're good at preserving them and freezing them and things like that. Mine bolted this year, but we'll do the sow along cauliflower for Xmas dinner. Would be amazing. Yeah. Do it. I mean, these actually say that they won't be ready till June next year, been sown now, but I don't think that's right at all. But hey, it's all good fun. We'll try it and see what happens. Ellesmere is a good winter variety of cauliflower. Not heard of that one, so but I'll take your word on it. Nigel says cauliflower freeze well. Yeah, they do. That's the other thing I was going to say is they do freeze well. So if you do get a glut of them, when you've got them in your freezer, of course, you can freeze them. I mean, if you're not going to freeze 30 cauliflowers unless you've got an empty freezer, of course. But yeah, definitely they do freeze very, very well. And nothing going on Instagram. Been harvesting collies for a few weeks now. Me too. It's been nice to harvest like one a week and just enjoy that, because that's enough. That's enough. And then that's the point I'm trying to get. We don't want them all to suddenly come into life or into harvest time at the same time, do we? We want them all to be ready and at reasonable times. From DT Brown, by any chance, talk about that? Ellesmere. I've never heard of it, so but I cannot argue with Nigel because he does know his cauliflowers. He's grown some amazing cauliflowers I've seen on the channel before. Talking, this seems like a good point actually. Shall we have a look at some of the photos that have came in, because we've had some really good photos I've seen this week. Surprising because I've been so quiet this week with COVID. So let's have a look at your photos. So Scott has grown these onions from seed. I can't remember the variety, but he said that his seed grown onions actually did better than onions grown from sets. And this is something quite topical at the moment, because on tomorrow's podcast, we've got the Seed of the Month in partnership with Premier Seeds Direct. We've got a new discount code with Premier Seeds Direct as well. And we are actually doing onions as the Seed of the Month, which we're sowing now. But this particular variety we can also sow at Christmas as well. So lots of options. I'm going to be growing onions from seed and set again this year to see what grows best. Chili Kate has sent in her plot shot of the month. I keep forgetting to remind everyone at the first of the month to send in a plot shot of your allotment and see how it's going. She says it's taken 2 weeks to recover or get the allotment back to how it was looking before they went away for a week. It's amazing how quickly these things get untidy in short amount of time, and dreading it when I go to my allotment tomorrow, how messy it's going to be. But we'll get on top of it again. We will be back on top of it as well. Annie's feeling very chuffed. I didn't get to her there yesterday, as I said, COVID, so didn't quite make it. But she went to a local produce show and she got first prize, which absolutely amazing. There's some beans, onions, potatoes, fantastic thing. Very well, very well done, Anne. Very well done. Kate has been to a plant fair. And she mentioned, this is Kate Spratt, she mentioned earlier about buying some citrus plants and things like that. I recognise this stall, Jurassic Plants, who are absolutely amazing. Their prices for what they sell are very fair as well. So if you are ever at a show and Jurassic Plants are there, highly recommend checking them out. I bought my Szechuan pepper plant from there. It was only like that tall, couple of inches. It was £8, something like that, from them. That tree is now as tall as me, and it's only taken a couple of years to get to that. Szechuan pepper, absolutely fantastic. Jenny's garden is coming along, she says. She said it's a bit messy, but she's been busy doing things and thoroughly enjoying getting the garden in a good shape. After only just moving in earlier this year. Excuse me. Nathan's tomatoes are finally ripening. This is a variety called Queen of the Night. Looks fantastic, actually. Tomatoes have been a bit late this year, but now they're finally coming in. And I got to say, the different varieties that are out there make it all the more interesting to see rather than just the standard red varieties. Now, Steve said, and this was the other day, he said it was almost too hot to harvest this lot, but he soldiered on. He had to harvest it because he had to post a photo for tonight's show. There's some orca beans, there's some red baron onion, there's some tiny temptation tomatoes, there's some Omer's Lebanese tomatoes, trying to read, some Calabres, Marathon, some courgettes, Randini and Solili. I can't quite read it all because the colours are a bit too contrasting, so I can't see what's going on there. But yeah, a lot of food. Well done. Now, please do keep sending in your photos. You can post them in our Facebook group and I can pick them up from there. Send to me via social media, or you can email me, richard@theveggroundpodcast.co.uk. That's richard@theveggroundpodcast.co.uk. Fantastic. So, what have we got going on? Ian Beddoes has joined. Evening all. Keep forgetting it's 6 o'clock start now, not 7 as it was in Spain. Got just back to the UK time, my friend. Hope you are well. I was talking about you earlier to Skinny, funnily enough. Idaho says excellent onions. They were hard, aren't they? Onions and garlic have done fairly well this year. I'm quite surprised. And definitely grown from seed is proving much better this year than I've done in the past, that is. Rob I've got some of my onions to go to seed. Were they seed or sets? Seed or sets? He also says, well done, Anne. Nigel says, Premier Seeds Direct, no Ellesmere. Yeah, no, they don't sell all the same varieties, but sometimes we have to shop around, don't we, to get the right varieties. Jenny says, well done, amazing, well deserved. I think that was for Anne for the first place. Scott says, that tomato looks stunning. I want to grow them next year. Yeah, tomatoes, always trying to grow different varieties of tomatoes, aren't we? And especially different colours and things like that. Harvested our first potatoes of the year today. Were they main crops or can't be first early, surely? We're going to be harvesting our main crop soon, I think, actually. Quite scary. Do I need to watch on catch up? Yes. Yes, Ian, of course you do. um, hope you're well. Hope you were well. They were from seed. Oh, that is unusual for them to go to seed, but it's been such a hard year. It's not surprising, is it? Idaho is Queen of the Night is beautiful. How's the flavour? Nathan, how is the flavour of those onions, of that tomato, sorry? Bizarrely, my red onions from sets did okay this year. Yeah. Excuse me, sorry, I'm burping at the same time. It's interesting, isn't it? I've always grown from sets because convenience, but I'm starting to move more into seeds, especially as I do a single seed per plug plant. It works quite well for me. But yeah, I still I think growing from seed gives us much better results, but sets are just that little bit quicker, aren't they? First early. Oh, those potatoes were first early. Cracking, that is late, isn't it? But hey, oh, he says Sharps Express, but did not plant till mid-May due to health. There you go. That explains that. That explains that. Steve has an amazing harvest. Indeed, he does. Indeed, he does. Yeah. I was gonna. I didn't get round to it, unfortunately, but I was going to do a little video this week to play in tonight. I'm going to save it for next week about the single seed potato challenge update, because my original video was on my server, which hasn't came back yet. But I thought I might sneak in this single seed potato. When is the harvest date for the single seed potato, Digwell? Let me know. Let me know. I will never grow sets again. A lot of people are saying that. I do see that more and more common. I do tend to grow from sets, as I've said, but I am understanding more and more about grow from seed. It's for me, I've not had the same results of growing onions from seed as I have had with sets, but I'm learning where I'm going wrong with that and what's sort of stunting the growth and where I'm going wrong. But at the moment, my onion sets that we sowed actually on this as a sow along, they haven't been harvested yet. They're still growing quite nicely, but they are looking half decent. Not huge, but half decent. So they should hopefully do well. And I'm hoping we're going to grow more and more of these onions from seed in the future to try and get better results in the future. I'm going to try and do different varieties of onions from seed as well in the future. Lots of plans. I need this shed. I need this this new shed greenhouse to really set up my seed sowing systems and get my organisation ready. Reason I say that is I like to be organised with seed sowing so that it just flows. Turbo Stream says my sets were from Poundland. Definitely got my pound back. You can't argue with that. You cannot argue with that. As long as you are happy with what you got, that's what you got. Nathan says that those tomatoes had a lovely flavour. Fantastic. They look gorgeous, I've got to say. Nigel says sets tend to bolt quicker. Even heat-treated varieties sometimes go to seed. Yeah, it's true. They do. They do. They do. I wonder why. Well, I mean, well, it's obvious why, because they're under stress. But yeah, I'm gonna be sowing seeds in order to grow my own sets effectively, isn't it? With this, Idaho says, "Awesome, thank you, Nathan." And Rob says, "Also, I like to grow from seed." Yeah, I mean, I've got to admit, in the past I haven't, but that's because I was always so busy with work. Now I've started not working as much overtime. I'm finding I got a bit more time to actually do what I really want to do. It does make a difference, doesn't it, when you are at work? Well, guys, I forgot to ask, was that mission accomplished with finding some plants that should work as companion plants for slugs and snails? That was the thyme, lavender, rosemary plants. We'll have to find out if it actually works. Added to that, I've sown the onions. Not sown the onions, you idiot. I've sown the cauliflowers, as I said. What would you like me to sow as a sow along for next week? I've got to admit, I quite enjoy doing it while talking to you guys. Might work out better in the future doing it like that. Nigel says, I only grow shallots from sets. That's a good thought, isn't it? Grown, yeah. Yeah, I haven't grown I haven't really grown shallots much lately. I've got to grow shallots this year though. Steve's Stes bolt more readily as a youngin is a biennial and the set is already a year old. Okay. Okay. I didn't think they were a year old, but I'll learn something there. I thought they were like a couple of months old. Toby Stream says, I never do well growing onions at Christmas neither, so won't bother this year. I always do. I always do now because it is such a routine, especially as it goes with the sew along for you guys. And it gives me something to do in that Christmas sort of Boxing Day time when there's not much to do on the allotment. So I always do. But I think the trouble I've had in the past is not potting them up quick enough. So they stick in the plug tray for a little bit too long and just get stunted. Shallots for me worked well from sets this year and they were beautiful. I've tried growing shallots from seed in the past and it didn't really work very well for shallots. So I might try that again this year actually. I have to look into that a bit more and see if it works. Oh, there was stuff going on over on Instagram. Apologies. Amanda, joy. Hey, Richard, it was me on it. Lovely to see you all. I'm going to aim to grow all over winter, but I'm going to set up a little bench and poly and make myself a nice seating area. She goes on, hoping it will make winter at the plot a little bit more comfy as I won't sit in the shed with the spiders. And she also says, well done, Anne. That's from Amanda over on Instagram. Sorry, it didn't come up until I moved the screen there. How unusual. I feel bad. Please don't think I'm constantly ignoring you, Amanda, at all. What have we got? I will start some of my onions off in November this year. Is that from seed? I'm growing them from seed in November this year. And Nigel says, I find with seed onions, it's important to prick them out at the crook stage. Yeah, again, that's the point I hate. That's why I do all my seed onions. It's fiddly, but I do all my seed onions now into plug plant trainers because I hate that pricking out stage. And it's like, you've got to do it, as you say, as soon as they are at that crook when it's sort of the seedling pops up like that and then it starts to go out like that. When it does that, that's when you got to prick them out. But I find by doing them in like I did with the cauliflower straight into these plug plant trainers, single per plug plant tends to avoid that pricking out. But once they've grown in there, then they need to go into, once the roots a bit taken up the bottom, they need to go up into a bigger pot to get them growing. So yeah. I sow my big onions in November, if not before. Okay, that's a good idea. Good idea. Oh, thank you, Nicola. Nicola says, give a thumbs up. Done. Yeah, please do give us a thumbs up. Please do give us a like. Please do give us a follow, and don't forget to subscribe and click the notifications so that you know when we go live. I always hate saying that. In some ways, it feels so wrong, but I have to say it. I have to say it. Right. So next week, the topic I want to discuss is composting. I think we've probably done this before, but what I want to discuss about this is how can we produce more compost? And the reason I'm asking this, I'll go into this a bit more, is I'm worked out that I need to spend about £500 on compost at least to fill up my beds here over winter. It's a lot of money. A lot of money. So I want to try and save as much as I can by producing my own. How can we do that? That's the topic I want to discuss next week. Sow my onions between Christmas and New Year. That's when I usually do mine as well, or normally for this show. But yeah, sow my onions between Christmas and New Year. Yeah, I think, was that mission accomplished earlier as well? I also want you guys set me a challenge, a mission for next week too. You got a few minutes to think about it. Rob says, I got a comment today on a video calling me and June boring old farts. Ignore it. Delete it. Delete it. It's your channel. If it goes, it doesn't matter. But if you delete it, it's gone out your mind. You'll be amazed how easy it works. Just delete it. Don't have to think about it again. Can't please everyone. Exactly. You cannot please everyone. There's some people that would just criticize and what have you. Sometimes some comments can be valid, but if they niggle you, delete them and it's gone out your mind. You don't have to worry about it again. It's such an easy fix. Trust me, you won't give it a second thought if you delete it. Obviously, I don't condone for deleting all comments that you disagree with. Sometimes having a good debate can be good, but sometimes for your own mental health, you do have to delete some things. I mean, I've never blocked anybody on my channel because I like open debate, but I do get some critics, shall we say. I leave it on. Never had one like it before. That's why I say you're leaving it on, and it's clearly playing in your brain, isn't it? It's clearly playing in your brain. You cannot please everyone. You've got one negative comment, but you've probably got 100 positive comments, and you're focusing on that one negative comment. Focus on the positive comments. And at the end of the day, we're all in the same boat. We're all here. We're doing the same thing. It goes on everywhere. There's negativity everywhere. And this is why I don't, on my channel, on this show as well, we're very glad that we bring in the positivity. And this also goes on in the Facebook group. I know we don't go in the Facebook group as much now because of YouTube, Facebook's rules. But our Facebook group, there is no negativity that goes on in there. I don't have to admin it because we keep it as a positive place. There's never, if somebody asks for help is offered, and it's never done with a view of, well, you should know this. It's done with just sharing information. Positivity is what we need more of. Digros asks, was it him? Yes, it was you, Digros. I'm sure it was. I mean, I remember when when it happened on my channel, I spoke to you about a few months back. Benno's, the challenge is get rid of all the ivy in the garden at ours. Good luck. Good luck. That is a nightmare to get rid of ivy. I'm still getting rid of it now. It's a problem. It's a problem. Oh, Rob, people can be so rude. I think you're wonderful. Absolutely. Rob, we all think you're wonderful. Just it's not you can't please them all. They don't have to view. Exactly. They don't have to view. Thank you very much. And it was an old video. Don't think they realized I get notifications. Like I said, pull it out of your mind. If you can't do it without deleting it, delete the comment, move on with your day. You can't please everyone. You cannot please everyone. Right, guys, so coming back, next week, as I said, I want to talk about this compost, how we can produce more and more compost. I also want to, I need a mission, a challenge that you can set me. I'm trying to think, what am I doing next weekend? Got nothing in the pipeline that I can think of, so I'm hoping to get down to the allotment during the week. Oh, God, yeah. But yeah. Yeah, a challenge and a seed. I'm thinking my current thought of the seed for next week. I want to sow some chilies, and I'm going to sow them early to try and overwinter them. I think that might be a seed for next week. What do you think on that? Brambles are my nightmare to get rid of. They always are. They always are. You can either cut them off at the ground and constantly get the hoe working so they never come back and they eventually rot away. Or you can get goats in to chop them, cut them down, chomp on them, eat them, as Clarkson did. That might be another. Nicola, you've probably got the space. If you can find somebody with goats, they might be able to cut them down for you. well, that is early for chilies. I've done this in the past. I've actually grown chilies or sown chilies in August before to get them grown. They have to stay indoors, of course. Get them to that sort of size. We've overwintered chilies, or quite often overwintered chilies in a greenhouse or even outside. But I've started the really hot ones in August, got them growing through the winter, and then they came back with some really good hot chilies early next year. It does work. And this is part of the thing with the sow alongs to show what happens when we sow some seeds at the wrong time. One of the things I was going to show you, but as I said, didn't get around to making a video. The spinach we sown a couple of weeks ago didn't, or Digwell said it'll probably bolt. He's right. It's gone to flower. It's started upon a flower spike up. So that's kind of a point we do some of these sow alongs. Can you use neat composted wood chip as a top dressing for veg beds? Yes, you can. I've done that. I've done that before many times. I started uploading a video just as this show started. Now at 8%, only 4 gigabyte. Was hoping to have it published by 7 p.m. Slow internet day. I uploaded one at 8:30 p.m. Took about 15 minutes. It used to take me all night to upload my videos. And since I got my internet fixed, it's been brilliant. Nigel says, did you use grow lights for chili sow now? Temps and light levels will drop soon. When I did it in the past, I didn't actually have grow lights. So no, I didn't. And I actually just kept them in the greenhouse. But it does help. I will say that it does help. But we'll try different things. So I think from what you're saying, you're happy for me to do chilies next week, which we will do. Seen people overwinter wet sweet peppers too. Yeah, I do that with sweet peppers. Normally December when I sow those, November, December for sweet peppers. Again, because they like that long growing season. But August chilies for overwintering, it does actually work. You'll be really, if you're going to do it with me, it will work quite well. Roxy Beddoes says hello because he heard you. She's been a good girl today. Yes. So, what about the mission? What challenge can you set me for next week? As we got 2 minutes to go, something you could suggest. It is YouTube, as my upload speed is 18 megabytes per second. I'd love that. Love 18 megabytes per second. Mine's 5, and that's fixed. Nicholas says, thanks, Richard. I have about 10 ton of it. Took 2.5 years to rot down. I use it as a mulch on my vegetable beds, to be honest, and it rot down on the beds. It works fantastic. I will sow my chilies and peppers early next year. Yeah, do it. I do them all. I do them in the winter because they need that long growing. Same as aubergines as well, providing whitefly and things like that don't attack them. I don't do chili. No, sir. Far too hot for this daft brummy. Fair enough. I'm still waiting for this challenge. I'm going to start throwing out a challenge that I might do. Find how much bulk buying compost was this year. Find out how much bulk compost is. That could be saying. I was a bit late this year. Chilies and peppers. Have you put a pond on your plot, Richard? We're not allowed ponds on our allotment, so no. Here at home, I got a little sort of water feature, a bowl sunk in the ground with water in it, basically. I don't have room for a pond. Amanda doesn't want a pond. Roxy doesn't like water, and it doesn't really edibles. Unless I grow watercress in it, of course, which would probably be what I would do. Or look at cost of bulk topsoil to fill raised beds. Okay, that would be something we can do. Yeah, there we go. Along the lines of what I was saying. Nicholas says, thanks for a great chat. And Rob says, we're not allowed ponds on our allotment. It's a silly rule, isn't it? Silly rule. Okay, well, that kind of gives us the challenge right there at the end. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. I hope it's been good for you. I know it's been a bit challenged my voice tonight, but we got there. We got through it. We'll quickly check over on Instagram in case anything has gone on. No offense taken, Richard. I just assumed you hadn't seen it, says Amanda and Andrew. It's because it says there's nobody watching on Instagram, but you're still there. Interesting, interesting. Anyway, when you say bulk, are you talking about 1,000 kilo? Yeah, I'm talking about a ton, buying a ton of compost. That's what I mean. You know, the lorry has to deliver it, sort of thing. But make it a bit more of a feature. Right, guys, I think we've got it all figured out. We will wrap this one up. We're going into overtime slightly now. Thanks so much for joining me. It's been a really good chat as always. Hope it's given you guys some ideas and inspiration of stuff you can grow in your greenhouse over winter if you have a greenhouse. If you don't have a greenhouse, then perhaps it's given you some food for thought to get a greenhouse. We will be back again next Sunday at 6, where we're going to be talking about how to maximize the amount of compost we can produce. We're also going to be sowing these chilies, and we're going to see where I can get the cheapest bulk buy compost and topsoil for filling up my raised beds. Right, we will be back again next Sunday at 6. So until then, please take care.